Tonight I'm going to talk about my evacuation just as the war broke out. I think it was on the 3rd of September 1939. I'm not totally sure because I didn't take much recognisance of age or times or anything like that these days. But it involved my mother, my young brother, who was just he's 5 years younger than me, and I was 9 at that time, and all the stuff that we were to take with us. So that was Christopher, which is myself, Robin, which is my younger brother, he's now deceased of course, and my mother, who is again deceased. We were told to gather at East Bank Academy, strangely enough into Academy Street. We weren't told where we were going. We were told what we had to pack in our case. Every one of us had our gas masks. Now my young brother, because of his age, had what he called a Mickey Mouse gas mask. It had a red face and a blue nose stuck out, and when he blew out it, breathed out it. So that was a situation. Our case was absolutely heavy. My young brother really needed my mother's hand, so I was carrying the case. So we marched from Academy Street, leaving our deserted school behind us, which had been empty for quite a while, marched across the road and up the road until we came to the church, past the church. Now, I didn't know there was a church there. I was learning as I went along. We then walked about another 150 yards and arrived at Shettleston Station. That was another revelation to me. In these days it was steam trains, and the carriages were painted a kind of maroon colour. You had what you called first class and third class carriages. A very large number of us had never been near a railway station, never mind on a railway train or a carriage of a railway train. We crossed over a bridge to the far side of a station and lined up on the platform. I've no idea how many people were there, but eventually the train drew in. We got a surprise. When we opened the door into the carriage, and I mean, it wasn't in any order we went in. It's not we went in with friends or anything like that. It was just fill the carriage, fill the carriage, fill the carriage. Now, in these days, these carriages were very old-fashioned. They had no corridor. That meant there was no toilet. And each carriage had an individual door at either side for people, depending what side the platform was on. So climbed in, managed at last to lift the case onto the luggage rack, which was above our heads. On either side of the carriage there was a long couch, which was a seating accommodation. I think it would have probably taken somewhere about 6 people on each side, in other words 12 people in all. Now some of the children were very small, so 2 of them could sit virtually in the area an adult would have sat in. The children in my carriage, and include myself in that, were accompanied either with their parents or their big sister or big brothers, generally big sisters. That was fine, very much an exciting time, and the door was eventually slapped shut and checked by the porter or the guard, and then in due course whistle went and the train slowly chugged away. We were gradually going through various parts of Glasgow we'd never seen before. It was amazing to see all these different back gardens and tenement buildings and factories. Really exciting. And we travelled along and along and along, and we were going now into the country. So you could see if there was cattle in the field, we could see them. Folk would say, "What's that?" You know, or "Oh, the black ones are bulls," somebody would say. The black and white ones, what are they? They're bulls as well. The brown ones, they were all cows. No. So a load of baloney, but that was the knowledge that the city people had in the East End of Glasgow. I was a wee bit better informed because I had been on farms and into dairies where there was probably about 100 cows being milked, roughly at one time by machines. Anyway, moved on, and suddenly it became aware that the lack of a toilet was a major problem, because if you have that number of young kids in a carriage, you just need one to say, "I need the toilet." And that was me. Now, I not only wanted a wee piddle, I wanted to add something else to it. And we thought, what can we do? And one woman went into her bag and she said, "I always carry this with me." And it was a potty. So I was set down on the floor, sitting in the potty with all these people looking at me. I was a top performer that day. And I helped to scent the particular area profusely. And in due course, the next problem came along. How were we going to wipe my bottom? Nobody knew. And then one woman said, "I've got a diary here, and some of the pages have not been used." And so it was preferred over and tore out a couple of pages, and in due course my behind was wiped, and the dates on the diary were committed to being thrown out the window of the train. So we looked out, everything seemed quite clear, and just unfortunately, because the train was moving, when we looked out, didn't see far ahead, and as we threw it out, there was a line of railwaymen adjusting rails just to the side of the door. They'd stood back a bit, but at the same time, when the potty was tossed out, well, it wasn't tossed out, the stuff inside it was tossed out. I'm quite sure some of these men got a sample. I do apologise, it's very late in the day now. I mean, that was in 1939. If you're still alive, you're lucky. But anyway, I felt very much more comfortable. But the stream after that went on and on and on, with all the children needing the potty. Some of the adults, in fact, actually needed the potty. We had no idea where we were going or when we would arrive. So you can imagine the predicament in our mind for the next problem that would develop along these lines. Anyway, struggled on, and then we came to the Forth Bridge. Now, I knew what the Forth Bridge was because it presented difficulties years ago when my dad had booked us to go to the Highlands to stay with my Aunt Meg and Uncle John at Morriston Farm outside Inverness. My mum hurriedly handed me a 2-shilling piece, well, I think it was or a penny, I don't know. I didn't know much about money in these days. Rushed me to the window, and this particular train had a corridor. So went along the corridor and found an open window, and I was told to throw the money out. This was while we were crossing the bridge, and you were supposed to make a wish. It was a single track, the Forth Rail Bridge, and very often when you threw it, you hit the girders and the money came bouncing back. Unfortunately, not to you, just onto the track. And the track may well have been, in fact, opened at the bottom. It was just rails and probably sleepers that accompanied the bottom of the track. So the money eventually would find its way into the River Forth. We got across, went on and on and on and on. A lot of folk thought it was very funny throwing money out of a train just to cross a bridge, but it was a bridge worth seeing. We eventually came into countryside again and saw wee cottages and saw an odd village. Trains always seemed to pass by the back side of them. and eventually the train drew into a station which was well under the level of the road. So it meant you had to climb up a stairs to get out of the station. Anyway, all decanted onto the platform. No names were up in the station, but this time we had hit the idea to confuse the Germans, take down the station names in such a way that if they came anywhere, they had no identification other than the probably very well prepared maps that they had. We knew that. We got out, we all had a wee gas mask box around our shoulders, the string in them beaten into us. The string went round and down the side and supported it at our side. It was a cardboard box and your gas mask was in there. We looked around and wondered how on earth we're getting out of this station, for it seemed to be a single line coming into this station. There was no platform on the other side. It might have been a wall between this platform and the other one, but anyway, we got out, stood there, and along came a very pompous gentleman wearing a very heavy dark coat, looked very expensive. His bowler hat was on, and he said, this is our evacuees. And he rushed forward and grabbed one boy. Now we all had labels round our neck with our name, address and such like. It didn't indicate whether your mum or dad was with you, it just said that was it. No dads were with us anyway. So he grabbed this boy, pulled him away from his mother, and he shouts, "Is anyone with this child?" And the mother stepped forward. He says, "Get back in line, woman. Is anyone with this child?" She stepped forward again. "Get back away, get back. I'm asking for, is anyone with this child?" And the woman came forward again, grabbed her son. He says, "This is my son, and I'm with him." Oh, well, that's all right, that's fine. Nobody else would allow him to take their child away to examine his label and behave as he had with that first woman. He was obviously very huffed. In fact, I think it came close to the fact he'd be nearly landing on the railway line for the discomfort he had created amongst the parents particularly and the young people that were there. The platform was very narrow anyway. So he kind of moved to the back of the queue as we all tramped up the stairs. When we got to the top of the stairs, there was a Boy Scout standing with a very well polished rifle. It was bigger than him. In fact, I now know it was a Boer War rifle, quite a few years back. And when we got there, we then saw there was a bus. The scouts saluted us as we all marched past and onto the bus. Took seats and looked around. We only saw part of the town. We couldn't understand where we were. Didn't know where we were at all. The gentleman that had greeted us on the platform hadn't the sense to even tell us where we were. Climbed on, and in due course the bus drove off with us all sitting there with our cases and various other things. We drove through the countryside again and so on and so on, until we came to a place, no name, you don't let the Germans know where you're staying, and we were deposited at the school. It was very obviously a school. It sat back a little bit from the road, and they had iron railings on a wall so that anyone in there couldn't escape. Went in, but the first thing it interested us when we got into the playground, the door into the school was the furthest doors away from the road. Beside it was a tall Stevenson ink thermometer. These were very common, enamel thermometer, and I believe, in fact, it was Stevens ink it was in it, and it indicated the height or the temperature of the surroundings. Had no blemishes on it at all. We eventually went into a classroom. Now, I don't know how many people there were, but we had enough people to fill every desk in the classroom. People came in and sat against a line of tables. These were going to interview the parents. The children, while this was happening, were all given cups of Horlicks. Now, we didn't know what Horlicks was. We were very suspicious of these mugs with Horlicks in it. We never really learned it was Horlicks till a while later. And each one of us took a sip, and some didn't, refused it, and just left it. Now, the headmaster, as he later turned out to be, became very, alarmed at this, because it was normally a great uptake with the children that he had in the school. And he tried his best to drink it's good and all that. At that particular time of the day, we would have got a small bottle of milk from a Glasgow school, but not Horlicks. It wasn't going down well. I think he started to see us as very difficult Glasgow Keeleys that would probably tear the school to bits in a couple of days. He purposely mentioned the Stevenson ink thermometer that hung out, that was anchored to the wall outside the door we'd come in. He says, now, we've got a thermometer there. You must not throw stones at it. We will deal with you severely if you throw stones at it. I think this was because of rejection of these Horlicks. They thought, these are a bunch of bandits, this lot. Anyway, while that was going on, the parents were being interviewed. And there was about 4 people interviewing them. And at that time, the parents were getting distributed with a can of corned beef, a bar of chocolate, tin of soup, various things like that. Not many items. So my mother had to eventually try crushing them into a very full case. This was to, in fact, provide us with a meal when we got to our location where we were going to stay. In due course, they then interviewed each adult as to how much money they had on them. Well, my mother told them, I think she had about £2.10. That could be a wage for some people. And my father had made sure she had money going away. He was very reluctant for her to go in the evacuation. He really almost, I think my mother said he fell out with her because she wanted to go in the evacuation with the children. But the news that we were getting about the German attack in France and Poland and such like, Norway and so on, we felt that this was essential that we get out of Glasgow. We were frightened of the bombing, the gassing, particularly incendiary bombs that were going to things, and that was it. So we eventually, after all that interrogation, my mum got no money handed to her, but all the people that came after her were given cash. I don't know how much, I've no idea the sum, but they said, you should have kept quiet about what money you had, you'd have got more. Well, my mother felt that was really being, cheating. So we arrived in due course at the various locations. Some of the children were given places with people in the village. We didn't know exactly where, that was it. I think there was a pub, and I think there was a shop. The rest of it just didn't seem to be other than little small houses. So we were taken along a road to the left, along this farm road. Now, having been up in the Highlands, and the dairy farm I talked about earlier, we knew what the big poles were that were buried in the fields. They were about 10 or 12 foot high, and were buried or sunken into the ground at intervals. This was to stop parachutists landing in planes. Well, it wouldn't have helped, but the idea was if they were using gliders, when a glider came in to land, it would be torn to pieces with these poles. That's provided they hit them. So that was it. I had to explain to some people what these were for. And right up the drive to the big house that we were going to, or the farmer's house, were these poles every so often along the drive. It was quite a drive, about 100 yards long to get to the house. Mum, my young brother and myself were decanted there and introduced to, well, one of the men it was a bachelor's farmers. Two of them lived together and brothers. The one that met was very friendly and really done his best to make us feel at ease. The bus turned and went away. We were met with the other brother and he reluctantly showed us the room. That was to be the room for the three of us. There was a double bed, a horsehair couch, which quite frankly is the most unpleasant thing to sit on, particularly if you've got short trousers, for the horsehair jagged into your legs. In fact, in some cases it easily jagged through your trousers. To touch it with your hand was jaggy, to lean on it was jaggy. There's no way you wanted to, if you could avoid it, be lying on it, sitting on it, or even trying to rest on it. The fireplace was a single fireplace and it had no hob. Now, a hob was in fact something that you could normally swing into place above the fire and cook on or keep pots warm on. We had nothing like that. We didn't have any fuel for the fire. And, well, as you know, we were given food, a can of corned beef, a tin of soup, I think it was Heinz, and a bar of chocolate. I don't think it was anything else. That was all very well. But the tin of corned beef had a little key on it. Very frequently, we used to maintain that the German spies had sabotaged them, because very often as you were peeling it round to open the tin, it broke, or the tin broke, and you were left with a probably half-opened or partially opened tin of corned beef. No way of getting into it, and as far as the soup was concerned, we needed a tin opener. In fact, we needed a tin open for both items. So that was unforeseen. None of us had packed a tin opener. The story from the senior brother was, as I said, rather unpleasant. You don't come out of this room. Every bit here's outside this door's yours. You don't touch anything. Toilet. Well, we boys could go out and find a place. Big ladies found it very difficult, for apparently the farmers themselves just went into the woods, so they had no toilet. My mother had to adopt the same behaviour, or use the potty that we had found under the bed. It was a old-fashioned shanty type thing, pottery. That was good. That was first piece of modern equipment that we had. So my mother set about trying to open this can, and I've never seen a tin being attacked, because we had to borrow knives and plates from the farmers. By luck we got the one that was very amenable. I can't remember eating any of the stuff, but we did. Now that posed a problem. What were we going to do the next day? There was no provision made for somebody telling you, oh, the baker's here, or you can go to the shops and that. And bearing in mind we were limited with the cash we'd brought with us, and the distance it was much longer walking back than it was coming in a bus. Anyway, my mother made inquiries again from the very helpful wee farmer. They seemed small men, both of them, but he was helpful and told us that we'd be able to get bread in the shop in the village and so on like that, and so on. We tried toasting, we eventually, when we got bread, we tried toasting it in front of the fire. Now, I think it was the housekeeper the next day was good enough to give us some coal and kindling to light the fire. Of course, the trouble was cold doesn't last long, so you had a fire on, probably had who cooked a can of beans. Well, we didn't have any pots, and farmers didn't seem to have any either. So the tin was heated just by laying it against the ribs of the fire. Some of the beans were burnt when we got them, I minded that. But that was it. I felt we'd reached cowboy territory. That was as much as I could mind of the eating facilities that we had to adopt and get by with. It was coming up to a stage that I think my mother thought, well, this is a really bad idea. But she'd made her bed, and we in fact eventually slept in it. I think it was that evening at the farmer, it was very helpful, took me and he took me round to the byre. Now, the cattle I was used to was quite big Ayrshires and Frisians, but the cows that they had seemed to be all quite small. In fact, it was so small that when he went into the byre, he had to duck down and go in through the door. I found it quite easy to get in, but I think it was about 4 cows they had, and he was showing me, and I was trying to tell him I had been in a farm and so on like that. Anyway, along comes the other one, and the first thing he says when he saw us in the byre, "You've no to come in here. This is no for you. You don't go near these things. You keep well away from here. Stick to your room." And the other one looked rather ashamed at this, but anyway, it got to a stage we avoided anyone at all that we could. The lady it came to, in fact, tidy up their house, and what a job she must have had. She was very helpful. I think she was used to their ways. If she washed a cup, I suppose they would be angry about that, for they left some of the sugar in it for the last day or something. We had no sugar for tea or anything like that. So Mum made a journey down to the village. It was there that we met up with quite a number of the other people. Mostly they were young people. And we got the news that we were to come along some other day. I forget what day it was. And we were taken for a trip in cars. Several people had volunteered their cars. Now, it wasn't very often I had ever been in a private car. And I got a chance of sitting beside the driver. Now, right at the front of the car was what I now know to be a thermometer for the radiator. But I thought that was the petrol. And of course, we kept on looking at that, and it moved up and moved up and moved up, and I thought it was moving towards empty, but it wasn't. It was just the temperature rising in the engine. It took us along, I don't know where. We got out and we walked up a pretty muddy path, eventually down to the riverside, walked along a path, jostling each other. The water was running madly below us, and we were taken into a cave. Well, it wasn't really a cave, it was a shelf underneath a waterfall. It was all covered in moss and slippy and such like, and we were told all about this. People would venture near the edge and start slipping, and somebody would pull them back, and that. And we're told not to go near the edge. I don't know why they took us there in the first place. It was a really dangerous place. We eventually were so pleased to get back out and into the various cars, kicking the mud off our feet, which accumulated as we had marched up and down the path. We were then driven home, or into the village again. Our parents hadn't been with us, so it was an adventure just for the young people. Some of the girls and boys that were in other houses asked if they could bring us in, so the folk in the house let us come in, mud and all, and they were taken up to the attic. That's where these refugees were sleeping. Accommodation looked really great and very adventurous and that. But in due course, we were called down, got into mode for walking back, and we walked back to the farm. In the meantime, Mother had probably gathered bread, one or two items she needed, and I think we'd got a toasting fork from the housekeeper. So fire was lit. We sat there toasting bread on the end of the toasting fork and, well, buttering it with a block of margarine, sliding it up and down it, and that was our meal. Things went on like that. In the evening, we went for a walk. Now we met a Mrs., have to call her Hannah, just say for her name was Hannah. Now she had two boys and a girl with her. Her husband was a tram driver in Glasgow. We later found out he'd been called up and was in the tank corps. I don't know if the tram car was a training for that, but that was it, the tank corps. Mrs. Hannah had never been in the country before, and behind every blade of grass she thought there would be snakes, deadly spiders. Almost everything that existed was there to poison, kill or maim them. We went down to the bottom of the drive and we walked along. Now there was berries growing in the rasps and brambles, I believe, and the kids, like ourselves, were starving. I mean, what we'd had to eat was just minus nothing sort of style. And they dived in. At first, we picked them, and then they said, "Can you eat them?" Well, nobody got onto you. No, nobody got onto you. So we picked them and were shoving them in their mouth. Mrs. Hannah took one look at them and immediately formed the opinion these were poison. And she went in and pulled her children back. And they protested and said they were good to eat and that. And the oldest boy continued eating, and she rushed in, grabbed him, pushed him into the bush, gave him a kicking, really vicious. And my mother, and I think it was another woman with her children, were to pull her off him. She would have killed him if she'd kept on. We eventually calmed her down and explained to her that these were good. They made jam with them and so on like that, but not that we had the facilities to do that. We walked on further to where the Hannahs had been stationed. Now, it was to be a hotel for Alexander's bus service. Went in. All the doors, bar the room that they were going to use, was screwed up and locked. The table that was in their room was shoved against the pantry in the corner and screwed onto the floor. So everything that you had to be put up on the table. There was nothing else that you could do. They'd been given hay bags and told to go over to the farm and stuff them with hay. Well, didn't I fancy that? But when we did get over to the farm, they showed us chaff. Now, Mrs. Hannah took one look around and thought, oh, this is a place where the rats hang out. And no putting that in the bag. So on the way back, or on the way there, we saw heaps of grass. So we helped them to stuff it with the grass, heaps of grass that were on the lawn. It was a big lawn, plenty of grass, and that was in due course taken in and laid down on the floor against, so their heads would all be heading towards the wall. And the only lights they had, there was electric light in the place, but it was switched off and the place was all locked up for that. I don't recall they had a key to the door, but it was a very wide door. It was shut at night. Mrs. Hannah had a fear that people would come in and damage them, do a lot of terrible things to them. They had candles, so the candles were lit. Now this is Mrs. Hannah's story and the kids' story. They lit the candles and put them along the edge of the kerb. They had no fire, they had nothing burning in the fire. That was the only light they had. And Mrs. Hannah, the kids got to sleep very quickly on the grass, bags full of grass. After a while, apparently she started screaming again, raised everybody, rushed them over to the window, and on the wall above the fireplace was a whole series of like tentacles moving about. The reason for this was caterpillars had come out of the grass and made their way to the source of the candles, which attracted them, and as they moved about, they in fact sent a reflection onto the wall, which in fact looked like tentacles on the wall. Nobody went to bed again. The candles eventually guttered out, and in the morning, 2 tired boys, a tired girl, and an almost insane woman, Mrs. Hannah, was there. She eventually came along and told us she didn't associate the caterpillars with the tentacles, but when we went back to the location, we managed to explain to them what had happened, which I think helped her a little bit. But the thought of caterpillars being even in the same house as them, and where had they gone, and so on. So you can imagine how fearful that was. Mrs. Hannah, I don't know what happened to her. But my mother was starting to make plans for to get home. But several days before the plan went into action, she'd inquired of the shop where the buses went, and they were reluctant to tell us, because we might have been spies. We just knew. In fact, it took us years to find out the village was called Ballingowan. So eventually my mum teased information out of someone, and they said there was a bus every so many hours. Now, we didn't know if we needed permission to leave. We're certainly going to wait. My mother was certainly not going to wait for it. So we talked to the lady who had been so kind to us at the farmhouse, the housekeeper, thanked her for all the help she'd given us, and made our way back to the village and hung about the village until a bus came. We later found that bus was taking us to Alloa. Now, Alloa was the station where we got the train into. We didn't know the train times, so there was nothing up like that would guide you. We found it was a bus stop. We asked, would we get a bus here for Glasgow? Now, I don't know what the reply was, but it turned out that we did get a bus from there to Glasgow, and eventually got home. We had no keys for our house in Sandy Hills, so we had to trickle down from Queen Street Station down to the Salt Market into my dad's shop. And he didn't give us a very pleasant look. He was really angry it had gone away. He felt as we'd left him with no chance of looking after us. But eventually, Mum and Dad made up, and we eventually got our way home. Now, we had to join a queue at Glasgow Cross to get a tram along to Shettleston, which was the best stop we could get. But we got in the queue, the minute the tram came along, and there wasn't an awful lot of trams, the whole queue burst open and everybody tore after it, jumped on it, no matter what their place was in the queue. And there was many pushing and shovings in that. I'd never seen anything like it. My mother was very concerned about us getting knocked around, but I don't know what happened. I think somebody punted us onto the tram. We got there and walked down from Shettleston Road, down Glenalmond Street and right along to Gilmerton Street, and eventually got into our house. It seemed so fantastic. It was palatial in comparison with what we'd had. We even had a cooker, we had pots and pans, we had running water, we had toilets. Never be envious of things like that. That is essential. That is life. So that is the end of that. We were home. Welcome home. I will go on later on to tell you the next part of that. Bye just now.